Welcome to Work Matters, a podcast where we explore what leaders can do to make work more meaningful, productive, impactful, and valuable. My name is Thomas Bertels. I'm the host of the podcast and the founder of Purpose Works Consulting. My guest today is Michael Leckie. Michael is you're an author, right? A consultant, a speaker, and coach who was really on a mission to help build the human capabilities that help organizations change for good.
Yes, sir.
And you come with a long career background. You were a partner at Gartner. You were a chief learning officer at Bloomberg and GE Digital, right?
Yeah, I was chief learning officer for the digital transformation at GE. Yes.
And you're just about to publish an amazing book, which I really enjoyed, The Heart of Transformation. And I guess I want to take the podcast today to just talk to you about some of the ideas in the book and share that with our listeners. So in your book you talk about the heart of transformation. The title is intriguing, right? So what's the central idea?
And Thomas, the central idea was that I spent a career, and it's funny, I just got off another call that kind of echoed this, but a career of people getting excited about technology and the transformation and change that technology brings. And it does. I mean, technology and the pace of change driven by technology has been amazing and overwhelming. But the way that human beings work and work together and think has not really evolved near as fast. A friend of mine says we're living in a world of second generation human systems with fifth generation technology systems, probably sixth now. And so when I started looking at it and I started talking to CIOs and CDOs, CTOs, and chief executive officers, what have you, at the end of the day, they're all saying, hey, it's not the technology. We either get it or we get there with it. It comes soon enough. But the culture and the people, how do we get people to change along with the technology? And so I began looking at that, and I looked at all these ways that we tried to change people, which were big, massive campaigns and saying, here's the new thing, here's the new belief, here's the new truth, get as excited as I am about this thing that will, ratchet up the value of my stock options that you don't have any of, get excited about these things that will put my name on magazines that you'll never be on. And everyone's like, you know what, I'm kind of worried about getting through the day, keeping my job, doing a good job, raising my family. And so human beings aren't built to change, they're built to survive. So if we're going to create change as a capability, it's something we have to work on, and it's human and it's individual. And so that's why I call it kind of the heart of transformation, because at the heart of transformation are people. And we forget that. We start pretending that it's the organization. And one of the things I mentioned in the book early on, I said, look, let's be honest, organizations don't exist. They're convenient. We have, names on paper for tax purposes. We have, places, created, in specific states to avoid taxes. We have buildings and logos and all sorts of stuff. But an organization is simply the people in it working towards some sort of shared purpose. Without that, there is no organization. But we tend to forget that. And that's what I was trying to bring people back to, is a very human approach to how do you actually foster an environment where change becomes a capability.
And you also argue that that's like the change itself has changed, right? So the nature of change today is a little different than what it was before.
Yeah. Well, I would say, and Thomas, I mean, we used to live in a fairly stable environment. Barriers to entry were high. You had a lot of capital, and things didn't change that much. And so you could sit and get the smartest people and put them in the nice conference room, and they could look at the markets and what was happening and what was going on and come up with a really solid strategy, and they could focus on execution. And when we love that word, execution, the problem is that the circumstances, the context we're in is now changing so fast, partially due to the technological changes, that our strategies have a really short shelf life. And some of our organizations are so cumbersome that by the time we get those translated and rolled out and interpreted, they're already old news. They're not doing any good. And so we have to move into that place where we're willing to, do two things with strategy. One, make it much bigger and make it much smaller. So make it much bigger has to be clear about some sort of purpose that people can get behind and some sort of outcome. And I'm not talking about outcome like 2 cents more per share this
Right.
quarter. I'm talking like an outcome that's specific about it, what it does for customers, for the world, how this product impacts things. And then how you get there, the micro strategies have to be allowed to happen in a lot of different places to achieve that. We're still kind of mucking about in the middle in a lot of places saying, here's the path and let me kind of lay it down for you, and then let's manage you to execute. And you know what, we get a lot of great people doing great execution on things that no longer are going to make an impact or make a difference.
Yeah, and it's going to take forever too, right? To to
Yeah, I
map
mean,
it all
yeah,
out, right? I mean,
yeah, and you execute the strategy and you're like, oh, well, geez, that's no longer the right strategy, but we're there. We're where we should have been 2 years ago, but hey, we're there now, and it doesn't do us much good if somebody else has moved forward a little bit faster and better, which is what happens with I mean, and people have talked about this. Clay Christensen's work on the innovator's dilemma has talked about it forever. You have to be willing to give up what you've got to move to the thing that you don't have. And again, that's a risk. That's not, doesn't seem safe in our context. And so we often will just hang on to what's been working, and delude ourselves it's still going to work, and that linear line of the future is good. I mean, we look back down the line of what's happened in our company, and then we turn around and we look and we just extrapolate that same line. We don't realize there's a cliff coming right up there because of everything changing, and we don't realize it until we're laying at the bottom of it, wondering what happened and how this startup company ate our lunch.
so that also changes obviously the work that leaders do, right? And I guess that's what your book is all about, right? So you talk about like the six capabilities that leaders need to really to develop to thrive in this right environment, right, where you have nonstop change all the time. Tell us about those capabilities and
Yeah. Sure. And I'll say this up front. The capabilities are not, gonna just blow people's minds with their new uniqueness. I talk about things like um, uh, uh, exploration before execution, humanizing before organizing, innovating before replicating, pathfinding before path following. And these are ideas that we've heard expressed a lot before in a lot of different ways, probably even in better ways than I say them. But what I try and do with them is say, look, we've talked about this and we can agree, yeah, we need to be more, curious and creative and innovative and collaborative and flexible and all the good things that we talk about that, good leaders and good managers are leading. We don't tell anybody actually how to do it. I'm reminded, I was talking to somebody about unfortunately, and I'll have to get past this, the only time I ever went scuba diving was a little resort, island resort, and we went out and I took the learn to scuba class. And I was all excited because I have friends who'd done scuba diving. And we got down, and then I was having a problem just kind of maintaining a level. And I could see the instructor like, saying things. And finally she gives me this irritated thumbs up. So we both went to the surface and she goes, you have to stay level. I said, okay, I'm trying. What do I do? She goes, just stay level. And when we got done with the thing, I actually got mad at her. I usually don't. I said, I got to tell you, you were the most useless person I've ever worked with on anything like this, because you told me, just stay level. I don't know how to do that. But yet we spend our lives telling people be this or be that, and we don't tell them how. So in the book, what I've tried to do, and with my work, what I've tried to do is said, okay, how can you actually, adopt this being, exploring before executing, humanizing before organizing. And for me, it's simply you have to change some behaviors, but you have to even get more concrete, which is some of the easiest behaviors to change are the questions you ask, and then what happens when you ask them and what you do. And so for each of the capabilities, what I do is I give people a handful of questions. They're not the only ones, maybe not even the best ones. I hope they're pretty good ones. I think they are, but they're questions that when asked of yourself, of others, and answered, start to reveal the assumptions that we're working on that we're not paying any attention to, and actually might start to give us cause to challenge some of those assumptions of ourselves or others, and move to a place where we're actually learning and growing and changing. And the changing itself is great, but the developing the ability to change and some sort of process or tool to do it is even more important. And when it comes to leaders, to your question, leaders have to, well, lead and do it first. And they have to stop thinking that because I'm the head of finance, what I know about finance is most important. It's now, how do I actually lead change? And I do that by learning how to change myself and doing that publicly so people see it and start to feel some psychological safety with their own changing and having to learn and unlearn and relearn and not know. And so really in the book is written, the tools can be used by anybody, but for leaders, it's how do you not only use those tools, but do it somewhat vulnerably, a little bit nakedly on the stage, and approach it with humility so others believe that you're sincere and believe that it's okay for them to do it too, as opposed to, we all need to transform. Y'all change, I'll sit back and judge that when performance review time comes around. That's not a real recipe for supporting people.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I love the real practical approach that you've taken, right? Where you say, you
Thank you.
got to start with, as you say, right, the questions you ask yourself, and and take a hard look at the answers, right?
Yeah.
And also, again, start that dialogue. It's not just yourself that right needs to figure out everything, right? It's a collective effort, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the questions are really excellent guide for leadership teams even to explore together.
Yeah, because you think about all the meetings you've been in or participated in or watched, and so many of them are just, so useless and so awful, quite frankly. Not to mince words. And yet, a meeting where you're actually exploring something together, and it's okay to do that, is the one that gets really interesting. And so, what I try and do is I try and have accessible but provocative enough questions. Like, one of them that I've used that people really respond to well is, well, what's the cost of replicating this success? Something's working really well, so we're not paying any attention to it. Let's focus on other things. Well, what's the cost of continuing to replicate this? And sometimes it's the right thing to continue to replicate and scale and go to market with. It's still the right product or the right service. But we also discovered that the cost of just replicating it is, we're sacrificing innovation, we're sacrificing learning, we're not paying enough attention to when it might no longer be the right thing to be replicating. And so you have to, at least be asking the questions, which allows us to build the mechanisms in to pause. There's a great book. I'm going to blank in his name right now, by Ed Hess and Catherine Ludwig, called Humility is the New Smart. And in it, Ed says that what we know to be true today has a shelf life of about 3 years, which just is a statement that blows me away. I've got to call Ed and ask him, what's the research behind that? Because I got to know. But I mean, we're operating in a world where, truth is changing. Things we knew to be true are changing very rapidly. And yet, if we operate under the old truths, we soon find that we're out of context, we're kind of out of our time, or a bit anachronistic. And it happens to a lot of organizations. And when it's too late when they start to realize that. And then at the top, they say, we have to completely transform and change. And nobody else has a skill or capability to do that or knows how. They're just going to wait until a new management comes around, or if it all goes sideways, they'll go back out and get a job somewhere else. They've got a skill that can move them somewhere. So they're not near as invested in making that happen, and it becomes too late, I think.
So one of the principles in your book, right? I think exploring versus executing, right? You have a lot of great stories in the book, right? Which I think makes it a real pleasure to
Oh,
read.
thank you.
When you talk about like the Jeff Immelt's vision, right? It becomes like a digital industrial company, right? And
Right.
how that didn't quite turn out as expected, right? Do you mind sharing the story? I thought it was really insightful.
No, I don't mind at all. I mean, and so, I worked, so full disclosure and everything, I worked for GE for 2 years, as the chief learning officer for the digital transformation. I worked with them for a number of years before that, when I was part of Gartner. Um, I will say this, and I'll say it again, and we'll see if it stands the test of time when this video is unearthed, some time from now. I still believe that Jeff had absolutely the right idea. I think that his idea of moving from being a company that built and serviced big, beautiful machines to being a platform as a service for the industrial Internet of Things was and is spot on. Um, and I think that GE was in a pole position to do this. They had the intellectual firepower, they had the vision, the dream to do it. Um, and they actually even had, at one point, the scale to make the investment in something that didn't have an immediate return that shareholders could see, which we've kind of choked innovation in a lot of big companies that haven't started as innovators because it's expensive and you don't get to see it in your quarterly results. But when I look at GE, a lot of different things happened. There were some mistakes that were made, quite frankly, when Jack Welch was there, that happened before Jeff even came on board. That sort of caught up, and some different things with GE Capital, a bit of a perfect storm to pull away the ability to have the both the capital and the confidence, I think, to continue to invest in this dream. But when you looked at what people were doing, I think that one of the things that happened at GE is we're kind of betwixt and between this. We wanted to build this new way of working and thinking and operating, but we went about it the same way we kind of always did in many ways, which was, here's the goal and you guys break it down and execute it. And I don't think we allowed for near enough just curiosity, confrontation, exploration. We started to do some of that and it really was working well. But I think by that point, a number of dominoes had started to fall. And, at that point, for one reason or another, with, the different pressures they had, which I'm not, privy to, the board made a change. John Flannery came in for about a year, and then Larry Culp came in from Danaher, and really kind of took it back to things that everybody understood. Which I think they're doing some good work, turning some things around. GE still has amazing people and amazing products, but pulled back from really pushing the envelope because execution was a strength. Exploration was a growing strength, but execution is what won the day because it's what the organization was used to. And it was a lot of seeing really great, smart, thoughtful people who got it, but didn't realize that they were having a hard time breaking their own coding and training, that really got me interested in what I eventually wrote in the book. And in working with some of them one by one in small groups and seeing them start to operate differently, that's what really gave me hope. And personally, for me, my greatest regret is I didn't have at least one more year to keep doing that before things changed, because I think that we could have made a lot of progress. But it's why I tell organizations now, look, change is a game played by individuals in groups. And that's how it has to happen. You find the bright spots, the coalition of the willing, whatever, and you let it start to happen there, and you make it something that becomes a draw, and you make it something that they're doing themselves and exploring and figuring out. You don't make it a template you shove down people's throats, because that's just one more template we ask them to execute on, and it's just one more surface change if that happens. Is that helpful?
That's super helpful. I mean, it ties back to the theme, right? You got to set a clear, compelling direction and a North Star, and then you got to let go of the reins a lot, and
Yeah,
allow a lot of experiments and exploration to occur, right? And learning to
you
occur.
do. Yeah,
And
you
again,
do.
I think that collides like head on, right, with like the classical model that says, but we gotta, it's a 3-year investment, and we gotta do a big analysis, and we gotta, right, you gotta have all these milestones and KPIs, and you basically say, in 3 years, that's the point where I have to be, right, and I can pinpoint it exactly, right, and I think that's the fallacy, right, again and again,
Yeah.
that people, right, don't start traveling without knowing exactly where they're going to end up, right.
Yeah, you may have to work on how you get there. You may get there in creative ways, but you know what that destination is. And I'll be interested to see what Jeff does now with the companies he's supporting and investing in and working in, because I think it took a lot of courage to see kind of that vision and to push for it. And I don't think we work in a world that necessarily rewards that. Now, Jeff Immelt is far from perfect. He made mistakes like everyone does, like we all do.
Yeah.
But you also think of someone who was handed this company, what, the week of 9/11, and their biggest revenue at that time was aircraft engines. I mean, he took the company through some massive changes and kept that company going and growing. But there were mistakes made at different places by a lot of different people. But I still think that he was pushing for a great vision, and then we'll see somebody, do. I hope to hopefully at the same level, but somebody do what he was trying to do. And I think now it's more likely to be like a Microsoft or someone else who will do that and create that platform and really be there to, bring together, all the things in the industrial Internet of Things market, which they estimate the industrial Internet of Things. I mean, if you think about Internet of Things now, right? I've got my phone here, my microphone's on Bluetooth. I've got, my Amazon Echoes or whatever, all the different devices, the refrigerator, all the Internet of Things stuff. They estimate the industrial Internet of Things will be 6 times the size of the one we have now for consumer. So somebody's going to be out there making that work. But it's going to have to be done in a different way, and it's going to have to be done by saying, here's that goal. Now, at these small levels, let's figure out how to get there. How do you get your piece and kind of make it build up and add up, as opposed to deconstruct it and have it executed,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, what I love about your book, coming back to that for a second, is right. It really talks about like the ability of the individual leader to work on themselves, right, and develop like the
Yeah.
muscles and the mindset, right. And I think, I mean, obviously that needs to be accompanied by changes in organizational structures and routines and ways the work gets done, right. That enables people then actually to be effective in that, right? Because right,
Yeah.
if you do still do
Yeah.
like annual budgeting and 5-year plans and all that fun stuff, right? Then that becomes hard, right? And the individual doesn't really have that much space, right?
True. And if you go back and say, hey, we want to do something different here. Can we change the annual budgeting process for the whole company? The answer is going to be no, right? No one's going to do that.
Yeah.
But I was talking to a group once, this is at GE, and we are talking about it wasn't a group that I had done this with; they'd done it on their own. And the leader of it knew he wanted to do some innovation, and he knew that the way that they were budgeting and rewarded was not set up to meet it. So he knew he couldn't go change the entire reward system. He knew he couldn't go change the comp and the budget system. It was just too massive a machine. But he went back and he said, but we can change it for one project in these areas that we try something out. And so he went back to the human resources folks and the finance folks and said, here's what I want to do with my budget just this one time, this contained little pilot. Here's what I want to move over and spend. And here's how I want to reward people differently for this piece of it.
Hmm.
And they said, okay, that's different, but it's small, it's contained, doesn't threaten the big, behemoth structure. You go ahead and do that. And he began proving out that it worked. And he went back and said, here's the results we got, how we did it. Here's what happened when we did it the way we were supposed to. And so, okay, that's interesting. So that division began to look at it. So something like that can start to go viral once you've proven it at a smaller level, but you have to be willing to do that. And unfortunately, most organizations think that the best way to do systemic change is systematically, systemically. And it's not. Systemic change actually has to happen in individual and organic places and push into the system as opposed to just try and do it over through the whole system at once, because there are parts of the system that will no longer be needed. There are parts of the system that will need to be added on. So systemic change changes the system. And if you try and do it with the existing system intact across the whole thing, you're doomed to fail.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, that's also at the heart of Agile, right? Where they say, hey,
Totally.
right, let's have this product owner and they say where we're going to go, and then we're going to let the developers figure out how to get there, right? And
Yeah.
how, and that's it, right? And right, we don't need to tell them exactly, right, when to write what line of code. Let them figure it out, right? And if
You're
it
right.
doesn't work, right, we'll
If you
adjust,
look,
refine until we find something that works, right? I mean, it's a very human approach to doing things, right?
it is, and I think people forget that. As a friend of mine, Daniel Mezek, who talks a lot about this, and I remember one day he said in the conversation, he's, "Look, if it isn't awkward, it isn't agile. I mean, agile is about curiosity, awkwardness, confrontation, truth telling, exploration, being open, being vulnerable, failing, acknowledging it. It's a very very human approach. And if you even look at what the Agile Manifesto, I think the first thing it says, people in their interactions over processes and tools. That's the first thing it says. And yet, what do most corporations do? 95%, they put in processes and tools.
Yeah.
That's all they're used to doing. The people in the interaction part, well, how do you do that? You can't control that. What if it gets messy? What if somebody says you didn't do your job? I don't want to lose face. I don't want to be called out. And so we create these bizarre social gatherings and organizations where we all sit there with a smile on our face and don't point out the person we know is completely full of BS, or the person that's not telling us the truth, or the plan that won't work because of where somebody sits in the hierarchy. And then we have all of that conversation in the background, but it doesn't really go anywhere. Whereas in an agile team, you're like, you were going to have X done by today and you didn't do that. Why is that? Do you need help? Are you not capable? Do we need someone else to do it? Is something going on? Let's understand that so we can fix it, and it may be your fault, maybe not your fault, maybe partially your fault. It may have some implication for you, but we have to have the honest conversation or we're not getting anywhere. That's not what we do in organizations, is have those honest conversations. So with me, a book that's question based allows us to ease into that and start to change the expectation that we can't tell the truth to each other in our meetings.
Yeah, no, it's like I think it's an excellent book. I think it's going to be out in what, like 15 days, 14 days. When is the official?
Yeah, well, today we're recording this, I guess, is the 15th of July, and it's out on the 27th in North America. It actually was released in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and most of the rest of the world on July 3rd. So I just, like I said, it's got my box yesterday. It's the first time I was able to touch it was last night, which is nice. And I've been honored to get some really good endorsements and good feedback. Now it's just a matter of hoping I can get some people to read it so it makes an impact. And I think what is like the TED concept is, ideas worth sharing. I think after, 20 some years in this space, I have an idea worth sharing, and I just want to share it with as many people as possible. So I'm thrilled to be on your podcast, to have an opportunity to do that with your audience.
Wonderful, and I can highly recommend it. I really, I read quite a bit, and business books can be a tough, but I really I like your book. I like also the personal touch that you put in the and bring in your own experiences versus the usual five case studies, right? So I think it's
Yeah.
it's definitely worth a read. A
Well,
read.
thank you.
Michael Leckie, The Heart of Transformation,
Yeah.
coming to a screen near you soon. Thank you so much, Michael. And also, please don't forget to check out the other episodes in our Work Matters podcast series. You can find it on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your news.
I've checked some out, and they're good stuff. So I would definitely endorse that for the rest of the audience here. Do check them out. And thank you so much, Thomas. Always a great time.
Thanks, Michael. Bye.
Cheers.